Welcome to this web series, The Frugal Mindset, also known as Money and the Responsible Christian. This is the third topic in our Perspective series, where we're going to talk about generosity. Let me ask you a few questions today. First of all, as Christians, are we supposed to be generous? If we are supposed to be generous, who are we supposed to be generous to? Unfortunate Christians in the United States? Other Americans who aren't Christians? Foreigners who are Christians? Or foreigners in other countries who aren't Christians? Who are we supposed to be generous to? How broad does it go? Is the current attitude some Americans have towards foreigners godly? Let me ask you one more question. Will God bless us if we are generous? In this segment, there were many passages I could have chosen from. But let's do a few about being generous first. James chapter 1, verse 27. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and flawless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Then let's look at Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. And 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Let me ask you one more question. Will God generally bless us for being generous? Let's look at a few more passages. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 9. The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17. Who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Luke chapter 6, verse 38. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will it be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. Now let me talk about one more New Testament reference for you, and I'm going to paraphrase most of this. This is from Matthew chapter 25. And in this, it talks about Jesus returning in all his glory, and he separates everybody into two groups, the sheep and the goats. To his followers, he says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. And all his people say, wait, that's cool, but we never did these things for you. And Jesus will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So let me go one more question. Who should we be generous to? Let's look at a few passages there. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 19. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. Hebrews 13:2. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have unknowingly entertained angels. Now, I've got one more passage I'm going to paraphrase for you, and this is out of the Luke chapter 10, and this is one of the most famous parables of the Bible, one that I think most of us love. I certainly do. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. So it starts with a lawyer who stands up, and he's going to catch Jesus. He's going to test him. He says, Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, well, you tell me, what do you think? And the lawyer says, love the Lord your God above all else and love your neighbor as yourself, which was a great answer. And Jesus said, yeah, great answer. Do that and you will make it to heaven. And the lawyer, who wanted to justify himself, then asks, well, who is my neighbor? That's the key question. Who is my neighbor? And this gave Jesus the opportunity to tell the parable of the Good Samaritan. To understand the parable of the Good Samaritan, we need to understand the background. First of all, you had a couple different peoples. You had a couple different people groups. You had the Jews, who were God's chosen people, and they were special, and they knew it, unfortunately. And they more often than not got their being special wrong, and it made them all puffed up instead of being humbled by the blessing. And they often got it wrong, very wrong. For example, when they executed the Messiah. And then the other group was the Samaritans. And the Samaritans were half-breed heretics. And they were from a despised, hated culture. The Jews would not deign to even recognize. Now, there's 4 characters in the parable of the Good Samaritan. All of them are traveling the same dangerous road. You have the traveler who has to go through a sketchy area. Then you have a priest, sort of like a preacher from a prominent megachurch, supposedly a very holy man. Then you have a Levite. He's another supposedly very holy man. You might think of him as be like a senior board member from another megachurch. And you have the Samaritan traveler, who's a half-breed loser, who the priest and the Levite would have crossed the road to the other side of the street to avoid having to look at him, literally. So in the parable, the traveler gets jumped, and all his stuff is stolen, and he's beaten half to death. He's just had the crap beat out of him, and he's almost dead. Now we're going to pick it up on verse 30. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But when a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. The parable of the Good Samaritan. All right, folks. Next, we're going to talk about tithes and offerings.